The Leslie Marshall Show, the only true democracy in talk radio, of, for, and by you, the people. Live nationwide and streaming live at lesliemarshallshow.com. Call in with your thoughts at 888-6-LESLIE.
Here to set you free. How you doing? Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome or welcome back to the only true democracy in talk radio of, for, and by you, the people. Live on the radio nationwide, streaming live throughout the world on the World Wide Web. Check it out, lesliemarshallshow.com/stream. Keeping in mind, we stream live when we broadcast live Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. We're also carried on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Indiana Talks, that's indianatalks.com, soon to be also Pittsburgh Talks and Buffalo Talks. Glad about that. Also, Progressive Voices. We are at progressivevoices.com. In this hour, we've got a great guest joining us, and I hope you will as well. Keep in mind, you can join us via talking. It is a talk show after all. 888-6-LESLIE. 888-653-7543. Tweet us. Follow me on Twitter at Leslie Marshall. Like our fan page, facebook.com/The Leslie Marshall Show to FB us. Or send us an email. Go to the website, lesliemarshallshow.com. Click on Contact. Also, podcasts are available absolutely free by iHeartRadio's Spreaker division. Go to Spreaker, SPREAKER.com/Leslie Marshall. And follow me there to get your free, commercial-free podcast. In addition to that, you can get other things. The more people who are following us there on Spreaker, Spreaker.com/Leslie Marshall, the more stuff that we can give out. Always a pleasure to have with us and to have back with us this afternoon, Mark Taylor-Canfield. Mark blogs at Daily Kos. He has also written at the Huffington Post, truth.org, op-ed news, and he was with us during the huge 99% movement, and Occupy Wall Street, and good to have him with us. His articles and editorials have been published by the Seattle Times, Alternet, Crosscut, Counterpunch, many other websites, newspapers, and magazines. He was a reporter for 6 years at Free Speech Radio News on the Pacifica Radio Network and a frequent contributor to national media. That includes the Tom Hartman program, a good buddy of mine. I fill in for him, and that's in D.C. on Free Speech TV, the Norman Goldman Show in L.A., the Mike Malone Show broadcast from Atlanta, and the Jeff Santos Show out of Boston. Currently, he does a regular news report for Filter Free Radio in Portland, Oregon, where my favorite coffee comes from, Stumptown. Thank you for joining us, Mark Taylor-Canfield. How you doing? Good afternoon, buddy, and welcome.
Hey, Leslie, it's a privilege to be on your show again. And I just have to say that I remember not too long ago when you had a debate with Lars Larson on Fox about First Amendment issues, and you really kicked butt.
Oh, well,
so
thank you.
Lars and
I used to be paired regularly every week on the Kelly File when it was on during the day, and then in the evening on the Kelly File. But then they started doing most of their guests just from New York or from D.C., and being that I'm in Los Angeles and he's in Portland, that didn't happen. But he and I get to spar every now and then, and he sends me love letters via email. But it's always good to spar. Actually, I like Lars personally. I just think, politically that, he needs to have a lobotomy or, no, he needs to stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Absolutely. Mark, good to have you with us. Let's talk about raising the minimum wage. Got some good ideas and some, good stuff going on there in Seattle. But, majority of employers say, hey, you got to raise the minimum wage. Majority of people want to have the minimum wage raised. You know what? We are about 5 weeks away from midterm election. Republicans are actually doing better, unfortunately, poll-wise, versus the Democrat. Why do you think that is? When Democrats back something the majority of Americans want, and it would seem majority of employers want as well.
Well, it's a strange story to me because we did have the first ever national conference in Seattle earlier this year, and I wrote about that at Daily Kos. So it is a national movement. There are $15 an hour campaigns going on in Philadelphia, New York City, Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, and up in Minnesota. So it's happening all over the country. It's what I call as a journalist, one of those stories that have legs. It's not going to go away. So anybody who doesn't back it right now is kind of swimming against the tide, as they say. It's really a big story across the country. And actually, we just had Tom Morello, the guitarist for Rage Against the Machine here in Seattle on Friday. He was brought in to talk about the national campaign at the behest of our local Seattle City Council member, Shama Sawant, who also was one of the major speakers at the climate change conference in New York City last week. But it's a big story, and so I think, the politicians better just get out of the way and let the people have their way. although there is some backlash going on in this area. So that's something that probably a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about some of what's going on specifically in the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle, or in Portland, Oregon, or in the states of Washington and Oregon in the Pacific Northwest where you are.
Well, SeaTac, Washington, which is a smaller community south of Seattle near SeaTac Airport, was the first city in the nation to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage. Immediately, it became a court battle because the Port of Seattle runs SeaTac International Airport, and so they claimed that they were not subject to that $15 an hour minimum wage. So there's a big court battle going on right now between the unions and the airport and the folks in SeaTac. But in Seattle, we actually did pass a citywide measure which brings $15 an hour to Seattle within the next couple of years. Actually, by 2015, the phase-in will begin. And there is a long-term phase-in for small companies, but it is a big story here. The problem is that there have already been 2 signature campaigns that are geared to repeal the $15 an hour minimum wage in the Seattle area. Now, both of those campaigns, the signature campaigns, failed to collect enough signatures, so they weren't able to get on the ballot. But what's happened now is that some of the more conservative types have brought in the big guns, and that would be Tim Eyman, who's a very infamous sort of person in the Washington state and Seattle area, because he's a hired gun, he's a paid signature gatherer, and he's trying to raise over $1 million right now from the International Franchise Association, which a lot of those are small, fast food restaurants. So they're multinationals, but they're, small franchises in the area. So he wants to fight the $15 an hour minimum wage, and the way that he's going about it is he wants to run a statewide referendum next year, which says that the state must have one policy. It would be illegal, according to his initiative, for one city to have $15 an hour minimum wage and it not be the same for the rest of the state. So it's sort of a backdoor way of trying to repeal the $15 an hour minimum wage in Seattle by making it a standard on the statewide level. However, it would probably be less than $15 an hour, according to the information I've been getting from that campaign. So it's at least, if not to repeal the $15 an hour minimum wage, it's an effort to reduce it and to possibly actually even throw out Seattle's law, because according to that initiative, if it passed, it would be illegal for one city to have $15 an hour minimum wage and the rest of the state not be following the same law. So that's
labor groups that are backed by unions, and we at the Leslie Marshall Show heavily support them. Large retail chains, fast food chains have been really, I mean, wouldn't you say, Mark, over the last 2 years battling publicly low wages, working conditions. This has been well funded on both sides. And this has spawned a wide-ranging debate here in the United States over whether a payment floor is either high enough or should even be in place at all. Talk to us about some of the various opinions on the national level, and I'm not talking about polls, but obviously there are those that say, hey, raise the minimum wage, and there are those that are opposed that fight and have various arguments. One is it wouldn't increase productivity, or the cost would be passed down to the consumer, etc.
Well, it's an issue, obviously, that's been big in California lately and also in Washington, D.C., in the District of Columbia, actually, where the minimum wage was raised. I think that the major pushback that I've seen is amongst, like, fast food companies. They just really do not want to pay that kind of a wage to their workers. And I always point out to folks that there is a local chain here in Seattle. It's very famous. It's called Dick's Drive-In. Been here since the 50s, and people drive.
I've heard of it. I haven't been there. I've been to Seattle a number of times. One of the cities I didn't live in. Almost didn't get the job back in the day that I was applying for, but I've definitely heard of it. But go ahead.
Well, they treat their employees very well, Leslie. They pay far above minimum wage. They also provide dental and medical benefits. They have scholarships for education, and they do paid community service. So when people volunteer in the community, they actually get paid by Dick's to do that kind of work. So this is a small local company that's only in the Puget Sound area, and yet they are able to pay their workers a decent wage, a livable wage, and to provide those kinds of benefits. So my question is always, well, why can't the multinationals do the same? They have a much larger budget to work with. They're making billions of dollars off of selling people French fries and hamburgers, and there's no reason why they can't treat their employees as well as a local business does in Seattle. That's my statement on that.
All right. Well, let's also talk about how this has turned around, hasn't it? Because this is not just a left-right issue, as we've seen the masses, whether it's employers on the left or right, or the public, the voters on the left or right, say, hey, raise the minimum wage. These people need a decent working wage.
Yes, actually, Shama Sawant, our socialist city council member, ran her platform mainly based on raising the minimum wage in Seattle to $15 an hour, and also said from the beginning that this is a national campaign, which is sort of centered in Seattle, by the way. There's a lot of other groups that are taking their lead from the folks here in Seattle, and a lot of that national organizing is happening here. But she actually coordinated her campaign with a lot of small businesses who really supported this idea that, people need to make a decent wage. And as long as there was some kind of a phase-in, for small businesses, so it didn't wipe out a mom-and-pop shop overnight, everybody here was totally for that. I haven't heard any major opposition from the corporate folks in Seattle, from Boeing or Microsoft or Amazon or Google, Adobe. Nobody is saying that that's not a good idea. The only question has been, how do you deal with small businesses, and then how do you phase it in over a period of time so that it doesn't hit the employers all at once? But it seems to me that it's a national issue, and that it's really right now Tim Eyman and the Franchise Association that's fighting it. And that's, like I said, mainly for small fast food restaurants, which has been a big issue across the country this year. These fast food strikes have gotten a lot of attention, and they've been happening in Seattle as well, where folks at the major corporate chains are walking out on the job for a day just to say, we need more benefits and we need a decent living wage, so you don't have to have 3 jobs and have both partners working in order to afford to raise a family, which is sort of what's happening in the United States as the middle class slowly disappears.
Absolutely.
So
Mark, hang on, Mark. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to take your calls. I see you holding. We're going to share your tweets. Got a lot of tweets going on. Follow Mark on Twitter, by the way, at @MTaylor-Canfield, Canfield, just like it sounds. Check out the websites, dailycoast.com. Mark blogs there. Also, HuffingtonPost.com/Mark-Taylor-Canfield. I'm Leslie Marshall, back with Mark, back with you. Your calls, your tweets, your FB messages, and more right after this. I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome or welcome back. All my listeners, part of my family, friends of ours. That's how we feel about it. Our guest as well. Our guest in this hour is Mark Taylor-Canfield, blogger for the Daily Kos, and he's written at the Huffington Post, truthout.org, op-ed news, etc. We are glad to have him with us. Mark, thanks for holding. Welcome back. Talking minimum wage and talking to some folks. Let's take some calls from Washington in the Pacific Northwest. On line 2, Tom joins us. Hey, Tom, how you doing? Comment on this issue of raising the minimum wage, or question or comment to our guest, Mark Taylor-Canfield.
Comments and questions on the minimum wage is where we're at, and what I hear floating around, and what I can actually put testimony to as far as what I've seen actually right here in the region. Right, on the face of it, minimum wage and bringing that up to $15 an hour, right, is a really attractive thing to look at. But when we do it, and what we've seen in the past, right, not only here but elsewhere, is that we get a bump out of it economically for that region, and we can all point at that and say, hey, that's a really good thing. See, it's working, right? But the truth of the matter is that, 10 months down the road, a year and a half down the road, all those struggling businesses that were just barely able to keep up with what they were paying their people and keeping the rent paid and going through the process of making sure the taxes are collected, all right, at the small business level, right, it evaporates. It goes away. And what you have is more unemployed in the region and an equal number of, $7 an hour wage jobs that people have to take, right? What we really need to do is go about the business of getting those good jobs, those manufacturing jobs, those local jobs where people actually have a product and they make it and some of it goes overboard or overseas, and then that's the tide that lifts all boats. What we're doing is we're building retaining walls around small businesses for a while, but then the benefit flows away and it's no longer there, even for the reason that it's in.
Okay, Mark?
Well, quote Herman Cain and say, I do not have facts to back this up, but the trend in the country is definitely for raising the minimum wage. And I think, although there are definitely examples where that may not be appropriate, for instance, some 14-year-old kid in high school is working part-time, maybe we don't, want to give a $15 an hour minimum wage to that person. But somebody who's trying to raise a family and pay the kind of rents that we're paying now in Seattle. By the way, Seattle used to be a relatively cheap city when I moved here, but it's definitely the whole saying back then was I'd live in San Francisco, but Seattle is less expensive. Well, guess what? It's not so much anymore. And because the rents are going up so high so quickly, you have people, according to the latest statistics here in King County, you have thousands of people living on the streets, and then this new population of people who are actually the working homeless. They have jobs, but they're not making enough money to pay the rents in Seattle. So they're living in their van. They might have a wife and child, and they're all trying to survive by going to food banks. And it's not a pretty picture. That's happening more and more in Seattle. So what I would say about that is that there's another issue that must come up next, and I'm sure that Shama Sawan is working on this issue right now as we speak, and that is some sort of rent control. Because it's outrageous in Seattle where in 1 month your rent can go up $100 and there is no recourse. There's no phase-in. You have 30 days. There is no protection for people in Seattle, unlike in other cities like New York where there is some rent control. In Seattle, you can raise your rent as much as you want. And, maybe for small businesses and small, local property owners, that's not such an issue. But if you have major multi-billion-dollar development companies running the real estate economy in Seattle, and they can afford to do that, what you get is a big displaced population. And so now not only do you have displaced folks who are homeless, you have displaced folks who are actually workers who have no place to live. So there's got to be some way to address this problem.
Well, you have to do something. Thank you for your call, Tom. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll return with our guest. If you're holding, coming to your calls. If you want to join us, 888-6-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. Follow me on Twitter at Leslie Marshall. Lots of tweets.